moving on from sort of the broad conversation, we are going to get into the games.
Yes.
And we're going to work through them in chronological order, and we're going to start today with Italy-France, which takes place this Saturday, 6th of February. It's 2:15 UK and Irish time, 3:15 local time in the afternoon. Curtain raiser of the whole tournament in the Stadio Olimpico in Rome. Referee Matthew Carley, the English ref, is going to be taking charge. Weather forecast, obviously, as all weather forecast, subject to change, but it seems like the weather in Rome is nowhere near as hostile as it is being over here in this part of the world, and it's actually going to be quite nice. Not too much wind, warm, dry. Should be good conditions for running rugby. So there's potential optimism in this game in a curious kind of way.
Yes, it could be a nice curtain raiser, and if both teams are coming in with a clean slate in terms of it's a new competition, they want to hit the ground running, and if you have sunshine overhead, it's going to suit certainly France and the way they want to play. But even the more recent signs from Italy with their passing game and their wide offense, the conditions should play into both their hands in that regard, so no complaints at all.
And listen, what we're going to do in the context of the previews this week, because it's the first round of the tournament, we're really going to just separate out the teams, and we're going to look sort of at each team from the match, and we'll talk a bit about the games and what they need to do to win the games. More broadly, we're going to be just discussing where the team's at and what they're trying to achieve this year. And on that, we're going to start with the home team, and that is Italy. Listen, everybody knows it's been brutal for Italy in recent times. We've sort of called them basically what they are, as a tier 2 team in a tier 1 competition. They have won one match their last win, I should say, was in round 3 of the 2015 tournament, a 22-19 away win in Murrayfield. They've lost every game since, a 22 match losing streak in a competition with 5 games a year.
It's not good at all. There's no way of painting that or sugarcoating that in any kind of positive light. It's tough. It's tough. Losing mentalities are very tough things to overcome. You can see that in many club sides, and Italy definitely have that perpetually in the context of this tournament. So obviously they have nothing. They have a low bar compared to everyone else going in terms of what they're looking to get out. But there's still points of optimism for them, and like they shouldn't be doom and glooming. They have a fair bit of youth in their squad in terms of the age demographic of their squad is pretty young, which is nice to see.
Average age in the squad of 24. A lot of fresh faces. There has been some shoots of optimism under Franco Smith generally, and it seems like he's trying to really get a clean slate going, and I think the stakes are actually pretty high for Franco and for Italy. The squad is it's in a sense it's bare bones in terms of who the standout players have been. Giraldini has just retired, their stalwart hooker. That's right. And a long-time captain as well. Luca Bigi, the other hooker who's now going to be starting, has been made captain, but without big talismanic playmakers in Bram Stain and Jake Pelledri. And interestingly with Matteo Manozzi opting out of the competition for perfectly understandable reasons to do with the idea of bubbling in a squad away from your family for so long. He's in London or Coventry with Wasps, isn't he? That's right. So he's choosing to stay with the family, which is obviously understandable. There are a few other players doing that as well. Joe Marler, I believe, was the other one for England. But from an Italian point of view, I'm not suggesting this is the case with Manozzi, but they don't want to arrive at a position where it just becomes fatiguing even for good players to play for Italy, like especially when there's money to be made in other clubs. They almost it's one of the risks, while club rugby has been so great for tier 2 players in tier 2 countries in a lot of ways, one of the risks you run is that you end up not developing those nations at all, because you're just in effect plundering their talent and having them play their club rugby. And if Italy don't compete, and you get into this stage where they're just showing up to lose every year, and there's a lot of commitment goes into that, and if you're getting more money for playing at your club, people are going to have second thoughts, and that's why I really think that this is a high stakes competition, and I don't think it's without hope. If you look at their squad, there is a lot of young, exciting talent. One of the things that they figured out under Franco Smith seemingly last autumn was how to take some tries in the open space. Marco Zanon has come in at 13
and has been a bit of a revelation.
Exciting talent. The wings, whether it's Montigiani, Bellini is a very good player. Sperandio will probably be on the other wing. He's quality as well, and Trula coming in at fullback. They can all finish scores. And then they have that wonderful dynamic with Kana coming in at 12, with Garbisi, who's very exciting, at 10. it's a back line with a lot of optimism, and even without their playmaking back row forwards, you know, the back row that they had last year, where they have Negri in at 6, they have Mbanda coming in at 8, and Johan Meyer, who's another big South African,
useful
who's
unit.
Come in, He's not a bad footballer.
We've known they've been spoiled for choice in terms of riches at back row for quite a while, and Bramstein and Pelledri have been the two standouts at the top of that pile, which is why it's unfortunate for them, obviously in the position that they are, being a bit shorn of quality compared to the top sides, to be without those two is a blow. But in the back row, they're actually better equipped than anywhere to deal with a loss of that caliber, because their depth isn't that stellar in other positions on the field, but in the back row it kind of is.
They still have the capacity to field a decent back row and a back line that can create, if nothing else. So if in that sense we should be excited. From their perspective, in terms of how they want to play the game and what they're really looking to get out of the tournament, I don't think that they need to be moving mountains, but they just need to be like more difficult to play against. They need to sort of discover what Benetton have discovered without winning a lot of matches, which is just how to be an awkward opponent at home, how to stay in games, how not to get sort of broken up in the early parts of the game at least. And listen, they've had sort of limited success doing that, and they might improve if they go on. Like, obviously a bit of belief would be massive. A big performance that gives belief, it just renders those sort of last 20-minute meltdowns less likely to happen. Like a lot of the wounds that they've had inflicted on them have been sort of a result of their own incompetence in some ways, or just giving up or giving up.
All of that, like the difference between their body language in the first and second half is very telling. A lot of it is to do with fatiguing, the fatiguing element of playing top sides like they are, and being outmatched. It's going to wear on you over 80 minutes. But also, there's a fair bit of quitting them that's only come from the fact that their record is such as it is. There's no confidence is only based on evidence, and there's no evidence of them doing any of these systems and actually getting wins from it.
There's no evidence of belief that they can actually win a game, which just makes the stakes of conceding not seem the same. Like, we saw it last autumn in the game against France, where they put together a competent half of rugby, then they concede a try, and then they just fold. Just fold. Like, they'd have no belief that they're in the game once that try is conceded. And so they don't really hustle. Like, you had Xander Fagerson's try that he scored against them for Scotland last year.
The most comical tries you'll ever see in terms of...
The only reason it was comical, a ball bounces up and someone flicks it up to Fagerson, and all the Italian players stop, and Fagerson just trots over from 5 yards as they're all looking at him, and it's try. And like, that isn't it. Like, no team defending a 1-try lead on 80 minutes is going to let him trot over and score that. But Italy did, because they just get the sense that they're not desperate to stop them from scoring. And a bit more competitiveness would do that. So in terms of how to become more competitive, I don't think, like, obviously they don't have the out and out quality to cope with a lot of these sides at times. So they just have to be, what they have to be is just a little less, what am I trying to say, a little more disciplined in terms of, like, if your opponent is France, and France start balling out and start completing unbelievable offloads and putting together,
which they might,
sensational plays, of course they might, they're brilliant, France are, but you can live with that if you're Italy. You can live, like, that's a reality that you're going to have to face with, and you're not going to win every game. They're a better side. But what you can't have are just the sloppy mistakes, like easy exits. We're just going to give away a cheap penalty here, someone's jumped over the ruck, and now all of a sudden they're out of their territory. We're not going to give you sort of cheap tries where we're missing tackles. We're not going to, kick balls out into touch on the full. Just limiting the mistakes and playing a more disciplined game. We're not going to give away cheap penalties. We're not going to turn over the ball cheaply. We're not going to give you cheap yards around the ruck. If you're going to score against us and work your way around us, you're going to have to earn it. And I think that just needs to be an emphasis. Just being a disciplined, tight, well-organised team has to be a point of emphasis. For
and they have been in the past when they had less talent in the backline than they have now. In like, I would take teams a decade ago that were occasionally a scrap to play against in Rome. And then, as you say, Benetton do have good chops at doing that. They actually have heft in the pack, and they can surprise some teams. They surprised Northampton, I think, in the Champions Cup very recently, I think last season, where they had competitive games with them both on both home and away. And it's like, they're not that far off, but they do switch off at too many times, and so, some of the looseness like that just plays into it. Part of it's born from belief, but then other sides are just being well drilled. We were imploring them to improve their tackle technique and their first of tackling, and they have. There's been incremental improvement in that. But it's more macro than that, where if you don't believe you're in the game to begin with, then you are going to switch off when the purple patch comes on and the team scores 1 or 2 tries. They do, or they have certainly in the past, just shown a tendency to roll over and play dead, which is no good. It results in too many pumpings at the hands of teams like France, and it's no way to encourage the team or the supporters or anything. So you'd want to see a bit more of a hard nose and a bit more organisation and discipline in what they're trying to do, as well as in terms of improvement. I like the shape they were putting on with ball in hand on a technical point, the wide with multiple distributors in the back line, like a nice idea, and the back row forwards getting involved in the wide channels. They all looked like a good shape that nearly unlocked defences, but for the basic skill of passing. Their passing wasn't crisp enough or accurate enough to unpick those defences, and you'd rather than see them go like abandon that idea, I'd like to just see them get better. Because they are the underdog team, and that involves that means they're probably going to have to score a load of tries to even be within a chance. They're probably going to have to get at least 20 points in a game to have any chance of winning it. So I think certainly in the first quarter, when they have their energy about them, they should be looking to implement their shape and attack maybe slightly sluggish France. Like we've seen that on day one of Six Nations before. It has taken Les Bleus a few games to warm up in this competition over the years. So yeah, they if they hit the ground running, they have a chance to kind of implement some of their shape and try and implement their game. It's a clean slate as far as the tournament's concerned. It'd be nice to see that.
They actually have to play. They have to play with width if they're going to survive in these games. Just given the nature of the defensive way that the game is played, and obviously you're facing a Sean Edwards defence that is brutally physical and tough, and it's going to be very difficult to get around it. But in terms of the kicking game, where I just think they can't get trapped in is being, super conservative, where, you have a line out in the halfway line. You've got someone like a Woki or an Aldred breathing down your neck at the line out, and so you throw to 2, you try and set up a maul, you get a metre or 2, France have covered in, and then all of a sudden that defence is just on top of you from set piece. And then all of a sudden when you're there, what do? You really have to kick it.
Daragh sits deep and hoofs in the air.
RBC can't really kick it from deep. Realistically, you're going to have to box kick it in that situation, and that's where I'd like the scrummies that they have in the squad. Stephen Varney and Callum Brady, actually both English imports, are in there. Stephen Varney's the incumbent, and Palazzani has a number of caps for him as well, the other scrum half. But they're really passing scrum halves, and they're not really game controllers. They're there to set tempo. What Italy have in a game controlling sense is 2 10s at 10 and 12. Canna's evolved into a nice 12, but he's a 10 by trade, and he's a lovely boot, probably a stronger boot than Garbisi.
Yeah, I'd agree.
Yeah, and so both of them have a decent passing game, and both of them crucially have a decent kicking game. So it's vital really that off first phase, off set pieces, they get the ball into those guys' hands, and they get the ball a bit wide, expand the field, make sure that the defence has to defend the whole width of the pitch in behind, and that sets up a better kick.
It does.
Like in terms of just getting down the field and establishing territory, of course it's important. But if Italy are going to try and do the same thing that everybody tries to do, where you're huffing a box kick in the air from a tight space with a line out, France are going to be ready for it. They have better players than it.
They're dangerous, and they're also kick return.
Totally, and also it's just putting a lot of pressure on these Varneys and these Palazzanis.
Yeah, and the back three men as well.
They do knock balls out on the full.
They do.
They do make those kinds of mistakes. And more often than not, you're going to not get the kick quite right, kick it a bit deep to France, and France are going to counter and maybe not score, but move the ball and get the ball more or less back to where you started.
Yeah.
Good kicks involve setting up the defence, forcing them to come a bit wider, trying to disrupt the pendulum.
Pull the wingers up.
Trying to disrupt the pendulum and then finding the space. And Canna and Garbisi are the two players who are best equipped to do it.
Yeah,
indeed.
You'd think so, and you'd think off second or third phase. If you're going to your hypothetical line out in the halfway, go from side to side, or one phase up the middle, then round the corner, then back the other way, and then maybe there's space in the backfield.
Exactly.
That's
where
on
Garbisi and Canna to read that together as well. But it's just so vital that they play with a little bit of bravery, and I think that's probably going to be a theme of the day. It'll be a broken record. It is a defensive game at the moment, but for a team like Italy, it's just You're going to be heaping pressure on yourselves if you just try and play conservative. It's a false idea.
If they end up if you start seeing them slowing up and box kicking to exit after the first kick, and then if they kick a 3-pointer, it's my old classic thing. If they manage to scrap their way into territory and kick for 3-0 and think they're in the game, and it's like, you're not really. You're running out of energy already, and you're going to concede some tries. You need to be gung ho and go for it, because realistically, the way to beat the way they win this game, it's a very slim percentage of a chance, but they can win this game, and it involves them streaking ahead to a 21-0 lead when France are still napping in the changing rooms, and then having the French riposte in the second half.
The other thing about Sean Edwards' defence is it's a counter to the 3-pointer argument, which I know we had in this discussion. Like, Sean Edwards' defences are very, very miserly and very, very tough, but the one kind of area where consistently over the years they've struggled to deal with is like those great All Blacks and great Wallabies teams who move the ball wide and have a scoring threat from deep. And that's something to keep in mind for all teams playing France, is that when you're actually thinking that your tries are going to come from the red zone, that is going to be the toughest place to score. So really, Italy do need to have some plays worked into them where they're trying to break the line, putting in maybe a few attacking kicks, trying to work some space from midfield,
and trying to finish there from the centre, the middle third.
But I don't necessarily hate going for 3 when you're in that position, just because of the way defences are at the moment, where they just aren't letting you score. And I could just see Italy trying to huff it into the corner 3 or 4 times and coming away with nothing against this
potentially
tough defence. I actually think they're going to be easier to score tries from deep than it is
from deep for sure. I just think in the first quarter, that's when Italy's tries are coming, if at all. I don't like unless the last quarter try when it's already 4 tries to 0. That sometimes happens. But if they're to win the game at all, they need 20 plus points, and to do that, they're going to need tries. That's just the facts, I think. But with all that said about Italy, we hope to see incremental improvement, as is always the case.
And they do have some quality.
And they definitely do. So shoots of optimism, as is always the case, leading into a Six Nations. But we will pivot on from Italy and move on to France, who are definitely title contenders. They are certainly second. They were second fiddle to it England last year, but only just. And they really are a coming force. And as I said before, with them kind of with an eye towards the 2023 World Cup, which is kind of it's a ways away yet, but it's not in the French minds because they're hosting it, and they just seem to be building a team very nicely with that in mind. You can see that in the demographic, the age profile of the players involved. They're all quite young. They're all kind of primed to come into their prime for the World Cup, and they've established many things about the way they want to play. They've already gave their second string a run out in the Nations Cup, or the Autumn Nations Cup that was last year as well. So they're getting some good minutes under their belts, and they will be looking to challenge for this Six Nations. They haven't won one in a while.
That's true. They had a breakthrough year. Galtier's side looks very strong. They have some of the best stars in world rugby in the world. Antoine Dupont springs to mind. Even Teddy Thomas. They have some box office talent, and now they have a robust defence under Sean Edwards to come with it. They did convincingly put Ireland to bed, Wales to bed. They did lose to Scotland, but came back and beat them in the Autumn Nations Cup in what felt like an important statement win for them out in Murrayfield. Obviously they will be frustrated. 2 second place finishes in 2 tournaments, very, very close, beating England and then losing to Scotland and losing out in the Six Nations. It's still a work on for them. Likewise, we'll talk about it in more depth next week, but heading to Dublin, where they haven't won in a decade as well, that's going to be a big factor for them. So they definitely still have some obstacles to overcome, but it feels like the next big step forward for this team is winning a trophy. I think that's where they have to go from here if they're not going to regress or sort of plateau out. They have to take that next step forward and win a trophy, and I think they'll be acutely aware of that. A Six Nations which involves trips to Twickenham and Dublin is as tough as it comes for France, and while there's no crowds, like, it would be mighty impressive if they came away with a win here. I still would make England favourites, but that's the task that's before them.
Yes, it is. In terms of the squad then that they have, obviously they're spoiled for choice as far as talent. We got to know a little bit of the guys in behind in the Autumn Nations Cup last year as well. There are a few notable guys missing. They'll be without Ntamak, Demba Bamba, Virmi Vakatawa
right.
and Camille Chat as well. They'd normally be straight into the match day 23, all of those guys.
Gregory Aldred was out of the squad and now he's back into the squad as well, which is interesting. They had a more expanded training squad, but the COVID restrictions in France are pretty robust at the moment, and actually they have a limit on the amount of players they can have. They can have 31 players.
Right.
Like a World Cup. Like a World Cup. But interestingly, I don't believe those players can play in the top tours for the entirety of the tournament.
Oh, okay.
Because they have to be bubbled as a group. So they have like this World Cup squad, which is together for 6 weeks, can't be disjointed, but also they can't bring in the reinforcements like other sides like Ireland have a very big squad, for example.
Yeah.
They don't have that luxury at the moment, France. So they had to cut their squad down to 31. And so it'll be interesting. And in terms of the team that'll play, obviously some of those guys you mentioned might come back. Vakatawa though I think is gone for at least the first half of the tournament, so that's a big loss.
Right.
Ntamak as well, missing definitely disrupts them somewhat. They might tinker with the side somewhat for this Italy game, but I suspect they'll go back to more or less their usual.
They will. Considering they're not playing the top tours rugby, as you said, they'll probably want to build a bit of momentum for their starters as well.
The tight five feels extremely settled. Cyril Bay, Marchand, Mohamed Ouas, Bernard Leroux, Paul Willemse.
Yeah,
that's like a quality. It's a big scrummaging engine room, but they actually get through a heap load of work. Leroux and Willemse were near top of the tackling stats.
Yes, that's right. They've found some really good locks. They were without them for many years. They've kind of, it's in terms of pieces of the puzzle.
Famahina went, and all of a sudden,
Famahina was a big mystery, a big red card machine.
Francois Croix is out with an injury, I believe, for the start of the tournament as well. Right. So that leaves them with options in the back row with Dylan Cretan, Greg Aldred, who we're not sure if he's going to play or not.
He's been in and out.
But they do have some exciting players. Jalanche is an exciting player. But Cameron Wokey for me is
has to start. I would think
becoming one of the elite back rowers, certainly at line out area.
His stealing it too it's like next level. We've seen from the likes of Peter O'Mahony how to do that skill very well, but with the way Wokey springs from the ground, he's so good.
He's been torturing teams in the top 14. He's a phenomenal talent, and if you look at like France's plans for 2023, you'd have to think that Wokey would be pretty well in there. So I would suspect Wokey will get a run out, if not this week, then onwards in the tournament. And then that back row, you've Dupont at 9, probably Jalibert over Carbonell, simply based on what happened last November.
Probably,
Carbonell arguably lost in that final off the bench.
Arguably, it's true.
Whereas Jalibert
was so clutch, and you were saying it was going to involve a coming of age performance for Jalibert, and sure enough it did. But it was not quite enough to do it. They're still the nearly men. They're very, very close to where England are, and they have all these bags of talent. Then in terms of the back line as well, like you could pick 3 different back lines from the French the potential starters here, but we have the likes of Vincent Rattez.
Rattez actually lost out on the squad. He was one of the guys who was dropped from down to 31
for when it was cut to 31. So we won't see Rattez, but you might see Ficou, who is lined up on wing and centre on multiple occasions. Arthur Vincent will probably be at 12. Without Vakatawa, it leaves a hole at 13. Do you go Pinot, who's played there before? Do you go Ficou as well?
This other lad, Pierre-Louis Barassi, as well, could be a shout as well. Either they have a rake load of options, but what they tend to bring is just a real rhythm and a read, fueled by Dupont and his tempo and his vision and his creativity. But
they run from depth, and they run great support tracking lines to a man, and they can all offload off left and right hand. So it's a must.
Vakatawa is probably the top performer in that outside back in terms of creating, so that he's a loss
for sure.
He definitely makes them weaker, but they still have buckets and buckets of talent. And I remember what their second string did to Italy last November.
Indeed,
and I wouldn't worry. Villiers is a guy who looks like he has a high ceiling.
He's been brilliant, and then you have Teddy Thomas as well, the very dangerous Teddy Thomas, and then Anthony Boutier at fullback, who's a rock and with a rocket of a boot.
And Brice Dulin breathing down his neck as well.
Who has been in excellent form too. So they're an embarrassment of riches, as is often the narrative when you're looking at a French squad going into a Six Nations. You're just like, how is this team not going to romp home and win everything? But no, they haven't done it just yet, but they do look more organised. And we'll just, I suppose, pivot on to what they want to do on the field with that squad and with that embarrassment of riches that they have. We've seen them become more rounded. We've definitely seen, as you say, rhythm and tempo being the key to their offensive structure, and they can tend to pick apart those very structured defences by executing in those chaotic moments that are being afforded them in this kind of kicking oriented game that we've seen in the Northern Hemisphere. Like we saw them punish Ireland, dash our hopes in Paris. They were very slim hopes, but they were dashed nonetheless from kick return, from a loose kick that was easily transitioned into a try. They are very, very dangerous to a man. And the attack is definitely going to be at the forefront, they'll hope, in this game, because it's sunny conditions, running rugby in Rome, looking to get a bit of momentum going forward into the tournament. But what's really more interesting is their defence, I thought, in terms of a build from, like, we know that France can attack, even when they've been at their most abysmal, they can be lethal. But what they have tended to not be able to do is defend accurately and enthusiastically for 80 minutes, and we've seen that change seismically since Sean Edwards has come in, as he's done for every team he's joined. The man is just pretty undeniable as far as defensive coaching credentials.
It's a simple one. It's a slightly different defence to what he had in Wales, in the sense that there isn't quite as much attacking of the ball. There isn't quite as much jackling. They're statistically, their top turnover threat is Antoine Dupont.
There you
go. He's the guy who has the most jackals for them last season. Which isn't a bad thing. Like, he's a guy who can get in.
He's near the breakdown.
The sense of it is, if you have someone, and Antoine Dupont's such a playmaker anyway, so tough. It's not a bad hustle, but really it's only if you see there's a real opportunity are you going for it. Generally, it's just it's discipline, and it's sort of line speed and aggressive tackling. And that's why you see, like, a lot of teams are trying to plough into them. Their red zone defense against England was awesome in the Six Nations last year. Willemse and Leroux were topping those tackle stats, getting up in teams' faces.
They were dominant tackles as well.
Yeah, exactly. Just winning contacts and forcing teams to kick it to them in the earliest exchanges of offensive sets. So you haven't actually really seen from anybody a true test of what's going on outside 13 or in and around that channel. Nobody's really tried to work that against them that often.
We haven't seen.
What you have seen is just a lot of teams not find no holes in and around around the ruck and the 10 channel, just nothing there.
It's plugged. And then, like, that used to be, there were all kinds of Joe Schmidt related strike plays to pull apart lazy runners folding around the corner of the first ruck from set piece. That used to be a very, very key scoring avenue against the French. It used to be there all the time, and it just isn't these days with this French team, and that is a huge change, and it makes them just so much more difficult to play against. Obviously, for the likes of Italy, it's going to be a tough task to break that defence down. But from France's point of view, they don't want to start slow. They want to start by, as you say, assertively dominating the collision zone from early on, setting that platform, and then their offense can take off from there. That's pretty much their picture is built. Like, even for an attacking team, their defense is what kind of has given them confidence, because they know that they can repel some of these great teams.
On both offense and defense, the emphasis is on winning individual battles. And where we talked about Italy in the sense of not having confidence and not really making those hustle plays, France are the exact opposite. They're covered in belief, and every good play from a player just adds to that. And so they're, like, on both attack and defense, they're not forcing the issue, they're not going mad, but they are being aggressive and are just looking to exploit the opposition's weaknesses, and on an individual level just winning your battles. One-on-one battles being won.
Key to fundamental good rugby. If you're not doing that, you're going to lose the game 100% of the time. So you need to front up and win your battles. But as you say, it's a less prescriptive approach. They're certainly not kind of being told that on this phase you do this, and then on the next phase you do that, and then on the next phase we do that.
A lot of scope is given to Dupont more than anybody. To read the game,
and they do have basic shape, more depth and more width than most in terms of how they line up. But it's designed to let those players, once they have their hands on the ball, try and unpick the defence themselves by winning those battles.
And exactly, just winning the contact, winning the breakdown, ball is quick, Dupont goes, and then they strike off
or
that.
Getting the offload away, which they're not averse to. They will try it, and players will run positive supporting lines, tracking lines off if they see it's on. The
other factor that's been so massive to them, which I think is going to count against Brice Toulon in his bid to unseat Boutier, is just in the context of how rugby has been these days, with the amount of kicking, the length of and precision of Boutier's long boot. It has dismantled a lot of teams. It did for England last year. There are
did for Ireland.
just their attempt to bottle teams up in their own 22.
Yeah, it falls flat when you have a guy who can pump it deep. Like we've seen it with France Stain and South Africa for a few years. Like if you can just pump the ball from your own goal line to the other's 22, like it just means that a lot of those we're just set off, the line out didn't go to plan, we're on the 10-meter line in your half, and we're gonna box kick because we're out of ideas. It's a terrible idea against France, not just because they're gonna kick return sometimes if it's too deep and they have a chance, but because if they have to recycle it, they can give it to Boutier and just kick you right back where you came from.
He sits deep into the pocket and launches it deep. And in the context of the modern game, they also have a very good defensive line following it up, but so few teams are willing to attack off that kick. Most will kick by way of riposte, and then you're just winning the territory battle and getting out of your area. So their exits have been so good. It's been so difficult to lock France in their 22 because of the weapon that Boutier brings with his boot. And that is that's a huge little area for them. And finally, just on the subject of the set piece, which we didn't really touch on for Italy. I mean, the scrum is just phenomenal. It's so tough. The engine room is so strong. They have such a serious pack weight and such a serious advantage there, and such
a tradition of it. They're trying to like in terms of the character of a French rugby team. It is kind of jouer when it's out wide and ball in hand, but they respect the set piece as much as any team in the world. They really do value a good dominant scrum.
Is in there because he can lock down a scrum really well. Marchand is more of a playmaker from hooker, but really the advantage is at loose head, where Cyril Bay is an excellent scrummager, and Jean-Baptiste Gros, who comes on off the bench, is an excellent scrummager as well. Indeed. So if Italy aren't careful, that could certainly be an area they try to attack.
Indeed, and then the other set piece line out as well. Italy without Bram Stein, who is a huge leader for them in their line out. I think he calls it a lot of the time as well, and he certainly is involved on the defensive reading of their line out. He's not going to be available, and you do have a guy in Cameron Wokey, if he's to start, who could just torment them in that particular set piece.
Especially with Luca BG, who hasn't been a starter and now coming in and now captain.
Yeah, it's pressure. Pressure on the darts.
Yeah, you could really do a job on BG, and then that would
lead to them unraveling.
Yes, for sure.
Yeah.
The final note on France as well is just that when we talk about them being a well-rounded team, one of the key notes that came out of that England game, and just a couple of areas where they needed to work on was to do with discipline, and specifically giving away penalties. Interestingly, they've brought in Jerome Garces into their coaching staff
to try and work on that.
So there seems to be some shrewd moves being put in to try and just round out this side and make them play perfect rugby. So I think they're fancying themselves to take the step forward.
That's exactly. Well, they're all looking for incremental improvement, like all the teams, like Italy we were saying as well. But with France especially, it seems like this is a macro plan. Like 4-year cycles, we were saying it is overblown. Like Erasmus demonstrated that you can do it in 18 months. You don't need a 4-year cycle. But France definitely look like a team with purpose for the first time in well over a decade in terms of the last 2 years, and it feels like the 2023 World Cup is the end goal. So with that in mind, they were very good last year, although they got 2 seconds. The next step, as we said, is probably silverware. They're going to be trying to win this competition now that they're in it, but ultimately having an eye forward to that World Cup that's coming. So it's exciting to watch France, and then this is a perfect kind of get yourself warmed up kind of game.
Well, in terms of how you think it'll go,
I think it'll go exactly the way I was just about to say. I think France will probably they might start a little slow, and Italy could be combative in the first quarter. I would like for the game to see Italy go 14 or 21-0 up, and then have France have to come back. But I don't think it's going to happen. I think Italy might go 6-3 up, and then France will probably score the first try, and maybe quite a few more if conditions are suitable, and if they get their tails up and momentum is with them, then I don't think Italy have the tools to stop them.
I was about to say it's a hard one to call, but I suppose it isn't.
It's not.
But I mean, my thinking on it is just I don't quite know what to expect from Italy, because while I do know what to expect, I fear for it. I think it's important for Italy to play well right away, or to show some improvement right away. So while the result is the result, it probably will be a big France win. I think really what you need to see from Italy is just disruption and being difficult to play against. They're at home.
Like we saw Benetton played Munster last week and were in a proper scrap against a better team.
And for the majority of that game, while Munster are not close to France in any kind of way, you felt like Munster were going to pull away. And while they did win the game, they didn't pull away. They had to rescue it at the end because they controlled the tempo of the game. They controlled where the ball was. They minded it when they had it. They didn't give away stupid penalties. They played with discipline and focus, and just became a very frustrating team to break down. And Italy need to learn from that. They need to just be not like
soft.
Yeah, soft isn't the right word. No. Just not stupid when the pressure gets put on. Don't compound things. Except if a great try is scored, fair enough. But in the meantime, we're giving them nothing soft, and that's what I want to see from Italy. If I see them giving away soft things, it's just going to be another painful year. And I think I have a bit more hope for Franco Smith's side than that. So I'm going to predict Italy disrupt France, hopefully for a decent portion of the game. I think France will have enough to win, but maybe 22 to 14.
Oh, I thought you were going to say 22-point margin.
No, 22 to 14.
Yeah, I'll kind of branch it out a bit more.
You take the over on
I'll
that
take
one,
the over on that one is what I'll say. I think I will and all. Yeah. But okay, with that I suppose we'll park that game then.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for watching the Overlap Rugby podcast. If you enjoyed that video, be sure to give it a like, share with your friends, and leave a comment down below as well. We really do want to hear your thoughts.